conversation? The UN, all right. Heritage, yes, exactly. So I feel like most people usually think of World Heritage Sites when they think of UNESCO, which is great, and it's an important part of what the organization does, but there's so much more, including the Creative Cities Network, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. So UNESCO created this network to promote cooperation among cities who recognize creativity as a major factor in sustainable urban development, social inclusion, and cultural vibrancy. And currently there are 300 cities across 90 countries around the world that are part of this network. And then within that designation, there are 7 different discipline-specific categories. So things like astronomy, literature, folk arts, and, excitingly, media arts. So the City of Austin, we received our designation in 2015, and we are the first and only UNESCO Creative City of Media Arts in the United States. So super exciting. So then in the Media Arts cluster, there are 22 of the cities in the whole network that are part of the Media Arts cluster. So these are places like Viborg, Denmark, Gwangju, South Korea, Cali, Colombia, Dakar, Senegal. And we are all committed to working together to support cultural production, engagement, sharing inspiration, technological innovation, best practices, et cetera, et cetera. So during the pandemic, the Media Arts Cities created a project called City to City, and this brought together artists through a virtual artist exchange. And so artists from the different cities were partnered up to create artwork, which then lived in a virtual gallery space. And then tonight's show, which we will be seeing after this chat, gives a physical presence to the pieces that were created during that collaboration over the past 3 years. And then some other pieces as well. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let these wonderful humans introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their work upstairs.
I'll start with you. Both names.
Hi everyone, my name is Faiza Kracheni, and I'm a media artist and nonprofit leader here in Austin, Texas. I have an exhibition upstairs with all of these amazing people. I primarily work in analog format and 16mm and Super 8, and I had the pleasure of collaborating with an artist from Košice named Miso, who was also an analog artist. So it was a very good pairing there. And all right, I'm going to talk a little bit about my piece. My piece is called Born and Raised. I am born and raised in East Austin, and it explores a lot. We had a lot of really rich conversations, but primarily both of us were born and raised in the cities in which we reside in currently. And in Austin, we are seeing rapid development and displacement of marginalized communities, specifically BIPOC communities. My family is one of those communities that was displaced from East Austin in 2008. And so it's exploring kind of the rapid development of Austin for good or for bad, and how we use technology to kind of bridge together communication. So that's a little bit about my piece.
So my name is Rodda, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I'm also an associate professor of expanded media at Texas State University. And I was paired for this exhibition with a woman named Bing Shen of Changsha, China. And essentially, our project revolved around the fact that we were having difficulties communicating because there was a huge time difference. This was also at the very beginning of the pandemic. So I was actually the first iteration of this project. And also just, language barrier. So Camus, and we ran it through a bunch of different translation software programs, and the results are that the text is pretty indecipherable, but it actually is surprising how much it sort of maintains its integrity on some level, and sort of the absurd logic is there in it becoming increasingly absurd, and also this is the only project that I think ended up being incomplete due to some miscommunication, and I think that sort of furthers the project in various different ways. So it's all about absurdity and miscommunication.
I'm Elliot Ray Fisher. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work in music and video and performance, and I am a part of a team that was participating in the second iteration of the project with EG. So,
I'm E.G. Hello, I'm a dance artist and educator. I'm also co-head of dance at UT Austin, and I'm half of ARCOS, which was 1/3 of our UNESCO collaboration. We had wonderful collaborators in sound and video, Meiyan Shen, who is originally from China, but was living and working in Karlsruhe, Germany. And Tae-Hon Lee, who is originally from South Korea, but was living and working in York, UK. So I feel like we get the award for the most international collaboration.
yeah, and so our project came on the heels of this very first experiment with the program, which had some successes and some failures, and they were trying to improve on it. And one of the things that we were lucky to have was a guest speaker. We had labs where we met all the other artists and were able to kind of try to find people that we might be able to work with most effectively. And then we had a guest who said, you know what, it's during the pandemic still, right? They thought maybe it was going to be over. Delta hit right when we were beginning the project. So everyone in different places, like in Korea, there were far more restrictions than here. And so our friend Tae-Hon there was very isolated, felt very lonely. And so our connection, our work in the project was a real gift for him. So anyway, this guest artist said, you should just take your time and don't expect that you might have to come up with a product, but just think about the process of getting to know each other as fellow media artists.
So our piece upstairs is called Told Hold. It's an interactive installation that came out of this desire to feel connection through isolation, as we are all very used to, but the idea of sharing stories as a way to connect, which was a very organic process to get to know some complete stranger from another country. We only met on Zoom, and we were tasked with creating something artistic together. So the installation upstairs, you can receive a story that someone has submitted to the installation, you read it, and then a guided voice in headphones will guide you through a little process of dancing with your hand and holding this person's story as you film it. And all of those videos of people's hands are projected on the wall, overlaid with each other. And this is our first and only physical iteration of this. It's something that we dreamed up early on in our collaborations with May and Tae-Hon. So it's beautiful to see it. And the hands literally dance with each other on the wall because of the way the projections are overlaid. So we hope everyone here will participate and share a story this evening.
Hi, my name is Lisa Woods, and I'm also a media artist here in Austin. My piece was actually not a collaboration with someone internationally. My piece came out of a different city funding program called Launchpad. And Launchpad is created to take emerging public artists and match them with a more advanced public artist to really kind of see the process. So if any of you have been to another kind of hard to park and hard to find place, which is the blue parking garage at the Austin airport, there is a gorgeous, gorgeous piece between the two parking lots called Meandering. And Meandering was a public commission here in Austin from a Brooklyn-based design group called the Mark Fornes group. And so I was paired with him, and our collaboration, or at least communication, was kind of interrupted by the pandemic. And so my piece, also inspired by kind of the separation between people. I think I was looking at a lot of patterns of how we're 6 feet apart and so forth, and how from an aerial view that kind of creates this beautiful pattern. And so the islands are individual people, and then like they're spaced apart, and then what's in between them is communication. is the thing that brings us together, right? We're all islands and yet we're not. It's kind of a play on that saying. So my piece was actually kind of a collaboration, not with another individual, but with the piece itself. And its first iteration wasn't the library, it was a conversation between this very permanent public artwork and this very temporary work in a place where really no one was traveling, right? It was a public space that was kind of devoid of people. Interesting place to exhibit the work. So it'll be much more populated upstairs, and we're happy to have people actually see it. It's called Islands.
Test. Ooh, we're there. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing about sonified topographies by chance? So there's one more piece in the show, and the artist team wasn't able to make it this evening because of a sick child, unfortunately. But it's a really interesting piece, and it's actually an Art in Public Places temporary project that was installed here, and it was facing outside, and it was called Reconnected. And that piece was basically, and I might get this totally wrong, but it was creating community poetry through the pandemic by taking bits of, I want to say, tweets maybe, and it was shown here. So it was taking little chunks of words from various tweets, and it created a really beautiful community poem. And that was a temporary Art in Public Places work that then got, it was temporary, so it got taken down. But the artists, they were able to recreate a new piece using that same, the same materials, the same LED screens. And they created a piece for this show called Sonified Topographies, and it basically, they're taking the data from different UNESCO creative cities and what was on like the top music songs in these various cities, and then running it through a program they designed that creates a topographic view of the sound waves of that song. So it's a really, it's probably explained much better up there, and there's actually a video up there of all the artists talking about their work, but it's a really kind of beautiful way of both recreating something from an existing piece, as well as kind of looking at what unifies different creative cities throughout the world. So on that note of international, I'm curious if you all have worked internationally before, if you've done collaborations like this, and what things went well, what maybe didn't go so well, what surprised you. Just tell us a little bit about the process. And you can start in any order.
Well, I don't think I've ever collaborated in quite this way before. I think this was a really new and unique experience, and I think has opened up a lot of possibilities and ideas moving forward. And just the UNESCO cluster being a thing that can connect us to other media artists, which like we sometimes, many artists are kind of siloed and we work in our own bubbles, and other people who like media art come to media art, but they forget to go to the poetry reading and like that kind of thing. So it was nice to have that open idea. We have performed and toured internationally before to very much tourist destinations, I would say. So it's culturally a different kind of experience than to be thrust into a really intimate relationship with people from wildly different cultures. And again, in our group, people who had lived in multiple countries, and were bringing that experience as well.
For me, it was interesting. So I am a media artist. I'm also a musician, and so I've toured internationally as well. I play punk music. I play electronic music, which is very much rooted in the underground. It's not mainstream pop songs on the radio. And analog filmmaking is kind of the same. Analog arts is kind of the same. It's very an underground movement. Particularly, I do experimental media. And so the person that I met through this collaboration was also a musician and an experimental analog creator. And so that in itself is kind of insane, because out of literally all of the people that I could have been paired with, I'm paired with this person that understands these artists from the 1920s and 30s and 60s, and we can talk about vinyl and records, and so it was very natural. I would say the biggest hurdles are the time difference. You know, when you're on tour, you're on the same clock as the bands that you're playing with in different countries and different cities. But when you're collaborating virtually, you know, it's midnight here and it's morning there and so forth, and so, you know what I'm saying. You know, language wasn't a barrier, but I know as a musician going to countries when I don't, you know, speak the native tongue, that it really is difficult, so I was grateful that we could communicate freely. I would do it again. It was chaotic, but I love chaos, so. My turn.
Well, I think that I've already talked about my project and the challenges that came with this collaboration. But I still think, you know, I really value working with someone from a different lived experience and a different global perspective. And so, you know, for that reason, it was a really great experience. But yeah, it was really challenging. And I would say that I don't typically collaborate when I'm making my work. So this was unusual. I mean, in the sense that, like, we all collaborate all the time. Like, it's not like we're living in silos, you know, lone geniuses in their studios. Like, you know, we're all collaborating all the time.
So just for some perspective, could you guys share how much time was spent on these pieces together? Like, how long did you actually work? Like, Liz, you had the tightest turnaround time. I think it was, so just for perspective, it was like there was a call, the artists were selected, there was the partnering between the cities, and then it was like, okay, we're gonna have a kickoff meeting, do something, and we'll see what you have in a month. And good luck to you. Like, look, we're supporting creatives during the pandemic, and go. So that was, I think that was a challenge. So that was one of the things that the focal points for the different cities learned. So I think Elliot hinted at this. So Liz had, I think, a month, maybe a month and a half before we had a virtual opening, and then there was a virtual gallery where the pieces lived. The next year, so that was in 2020, in 2021, I think we gave the artists 3 whole months to collaborate. And so we had 4 weeks of meetings, of coaching, and then again, like, and go. Good luck. And then Faiza, you and Miso had maybe 4 weeks as well, because that one was, the 2022 year was slightly different because it wasn't all of the cities, it was just the city Košice from Slovakia. They had received a grant and they had invited Austin to partner with them. And so it was a call just for Košice and Austin artists that time around. So that was another like, and go. Here is your 1 month time frame. So let's talk about the field of media arts a little bit, because I think this is sometimes a little difficult to define and explain. I think usually my go-to is it's the intersection of a traditional art something and technology in some way. And you can have a whole philosophical conversation about what is technology and what does technology actually mean. But I'm curious how you all got started in media arts. Why are you a media artist? Why do you consider yourself a media artist? What does it look like to you? And maybe how, I'm just gonna ask 5 questions in one question. So let's go with, why do you work in media art? What is it to you? And maybe we'll start on the other side with Lisa. No pressure, friend.
Media arts, interesting. I was originally a graphic designer and discovered media arts in grad school in San Francisco, kind of the heart of the media arts, in one of the hearts of the media arts world. And I think what drew me to it, a lot of things. I think interactivity, the ability to have a conversation mediated through some kind of technology, whether that's mechanical or digital. I loved anything that seemed futuristic. I loved the fact that it could do so many things that traditional art just couldn't. It just seemed more alive to me. Like I love art, don't get me wrong, I love traditional art. But there's something about media arts to me that feels like it's got more of a pulse, more of an urgency to it. And I think that's what really contributed to it. And so as I became a professional designer and was working in the design industry, I always had kind of the second love, the mistress on the side. There was always something I was doing that involved media arts. And then took the plunge a couple of years ago and I'm doing it full time now. That explains it. Just a love affair, a sordid love affair. It's now made legit. Congratulations.
I'm a dancer by profession, is that what we call it? And I have grown into technology through my collaborators with ARCOS. And that's not true. We collaborated before we formed the company because we had collaborated and did a multimedia show with like no idea what that meant or what we did, but we knew that we had dance collaborators, we had theatrical actor friends who were excited to collaborate, and Elliot brought this background in theater, film, documentary film, and we said, well, what would we make if we made it all together? And it was tantalizing and amazing, and it was something that none of us had ever quite created before. It really just opened up a new avenue for us. So when we created our company ARCOS, we discovered very quickly that like traditional concert dance was dying a slow and painful death that continues till now. And this hybrid kind of performance and expanding our understanding of dance and our understanding of technology gave us kind of a niche early on with the company, and realized like, oh, we belong in gallery spaces, or we belong out in a courtyard with a projector and a lone dancer. It opened up some new possibilities for us. So as we dove into that, what really has inspired me and has driven me through it is that there's so much that we can discover about our bodies and our identities through technology. It's an integral part of who we are. It's unavoidable. I have no interest in like, well, actually I shouldn't say that now, living in a field and casting it all off. Sounds kind of nice some days, but for the most part, there's so much that we can learn from it, and I'm interested in how we can bring our embodiment into our relationship with technology, and specifically our everyday technologies, our phones, social media, and the ways that we kind of move through those spaces.
I think for me, it comes out of like childhood, when before we learned the categories that people tell us exist, you know? Like I growing up, I was like making stop motion, claymation, and playing the piano, and you know, making up plays with my friend, playing games, and that became plays and became theater. So then we learn these categories, and then we have to like decide that we have to do one of those, and we can't do many of them. So that's why I think media arts is it's just a kind of vague umbrella that allows us to kind of avoid the categories that might be imposed on us otherwise. So I like just continuing to try to be like that kid and not care, you know, what categories people want to put in.
Yeah, so I've always been an interdisciplinary artist, and I think I've never really been interested in technology for technology's sake. And I really think that, you know, even when you're making a painting, and I know that you started to talk about this, like we could argue about like what technology actually is that you're using technology. So I think what interested me in video, I studied English lit as an undergrad, and then I went directly into an MFA that was interdisciplinary. And I think just being exposed to a lot of experimental video art was really exciting for me. And I was in Boston, where I got to the Harbaugh Film Archives every week, and it was just thinking about duration as a material to work with, and thinking about the relationship between image and sound, and the associations that you can make between images and between sounds. For me, that was really exciting. And I guess as an artist, I think about what I can do with each medium. You know, I like painting because it's about creating an image that's very direct, that can be experienced all at once. And I think that's just as exciting as working with video. It's just it uses a different part of my mind and my body, and I think that's really interesting.
So for me, I didn't mention the nonprofit that I am involved in, but I actually work at the first Media Arts Center in all of Central Texas. If you didn't know, it's in Austin, Texas. It's called Motion Media Arts Center, and we run a community film school called Austin School of Film. And so quite literally every day I work with media artists, I work with filmmakers, I work with photographers who are also painters, who are also sculptors. And it's just something that has been in my life for the past decade. And I see what technology can do to inform us as a society, how you can use these tech tools for social change. And you can also use them for artistic expression. So when I approach media arts, which I think still confuses people to this day, which is why we changed our DBA to Austin School of Film. Because it's straightforward, people think media arts means it's a newspaper or it's, journalism, and it's just all of these things in one. It's film, it's music, it's performance, and it can be all three of those things simultaneously. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing about media arts is there's no limitations, nothing's off the table, and you can take these tools and make something, and people get to experience it in a different way, which is what y'all are gonna do in a little bit, which I'm really excited about, so yeah.
So how do you think this is going to change in the future? Like, how do you imagine your work changing in the future or the field changing in the future? Because I think sometimes people, especially lately, are getting all worked up about AI and it's going to take over everything, and good luck to us human beings. So I'm curious if that plays into your practice at all, or if it doesn't. So future things, either as a whole or your individual work.
I think that media artists are really important in that, like, this unknown technological future that is upon us in some way. Like, there's just momentum, right? That's moving us in this direction. It's not going to be put back in the box. We are going to have all these things as we have layered on top of each other, right? Electricity, and then recording images and sound, and all of these things just keep getting layered. And none of them really quite go away, right? And there's thousands of year old technologies like making a mark or performing in front of someone just with your body. But media artists are going to be important because I think one of the things that these technologies are increasingly having us do is conform to them and comply with their protocols. And media artists in general, right, are like kind of interested in not interested in complying necessarily, or interested in experimenting or maybe finding the edges of things. And so it's going to be really, I think we're going to be important guides and experimenting with models for how we all need to be navigating this world, moving too big.
I have a positive spin on the AI stuff, which is, in my nonprofit work, we have accessible education, and what I'm seeing is tech is more accessible. It's not just for, people of a certain class status, and I think that that's really important to think about when you're thinking about media arts, is how people interact with it. Are these tools accessible? Are they affordable? And what happens when the playing field gets more and more level? Are we going to see more radical art popping up using tech the way that we see graffiti? I would love to see that. I would we're kind of already seeing it with installation work in larger cities, kind of taking over LED screens and things of that nature. So I think it's a very exciting time when tech starts being accessible for the working class. That's when you see radical change, and I'm ready for it.
I think I want to build on what Elliot was saying about how media artists don't always like to play by the rules. And I think in a lot of ways, media artists use the medium that was created mostly for a commercial purpose wrong, right? Like, you're supposed to be using digital, but you're using analog, right? We're supposed to be doing one thing with the technology, and we decide to do something else. We code our own technology, we even create our own tools, right? And so I think when it comes to AI and the corporate AI, there'll probably be a blossoming of kind of like, hopefully, artist-generated versions of AI that will do weirder, stranger things. And so I think, and those are always kind of in, they'll never dominate kind of the commercial model, but I think there are alternatives that always kind of spring out. And I think that's kind of our role in kind of technology. We can play with it, or we can actually critique kind of the larger narratives by using it wrong.
There's so many different ways I can answer this question, and it's such a important and interesting question. But I think that a lot of people ask me, are artists going to be out of work now that AI is making art? And it's like, well, we didn't have jobs to begin with.
Don't you worry. Don't you worry, you're so lovely.
And then also, I don't think that's not a concern of mine at all. I think what I'm thinking a lot about is AI restructuring how we work and how we operate in this world. And I think it's going to be important to have artists that are reflecting on that, not just advancing technology, but actually reflecting on how advances in technology are changing the way we interact and live.
I think it'll also bring back this question of what is art, right? If you put a prompt and something gets spit out by an AI, is that art?
All right, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I will open it up to you all if you have questions. So this is your warning to start thinking about potential questions to ask. So we're going to swing it back to Austin as a city of media arts. So I'm curious from that side of things, what are your dreams, or what would you love to see about Austin and this designation, and how do you see yourself in that? And what, I guess specifically, what can we on the city side do to help make those connections and pathways easier?
Really cool if there were more funding opportunities for artists and for artists to be in situations where they don't have to sort of constantly be worried about having multiple jobs and then also trying to find time to make their work. It would be wonderful if we had a system that was more like Europe, where there's actually support for artists to be making work. And I think my dream is funding and jobs for artists, and just
My dream is funding not tied to a specific outcome. And I think that was one of the real gifts of our year at UNESCO, was that there was really some radical people at the upper levels encouraging us to just stick with the theme of play, which was the organizing idea for that year. And I think what we gained from that experience far exceeds the stipend we were able to get. And yes, I would love to get a stipend for every project that I get into, but I think there's something in a dream world, there would be a way for a city like Austin to support both the underground radical artists at the same level that we are supporting Google and other things that are taking most of our time and attention and taking away actual time, attention, and space for us to do other things. So funding that can be for the sake of this research that's going to be very vital for us to keep pushing against whatever next thing they're going to come out with.
I think my dream for Austin is artist-run spaces. So Media Center, Data Geek, any place where artists have yes, exactly. And those are artist rented perhaps, but ownership I think is very important, because then we won't get dislocated as easily. So my dream is that there be some kind of funding, and that's not a UNESCO dream, but for actual spaces for artists to remain and collaborate and work.
Echoing on that, that's actually what I was going to say, which is until we address affordability in Austin, I can't really even think beyond that. If people can't afford to live in Austin and artists are being displaced, what's the point of a grant? Who is going to apply for that grant? So affordable housing for people and affordable spaces for nonprofit organizations there being some sort of rent control for both individuals and nonprofits or, you know, small businesses. I think until we address that, it's all null and void to me, because, you know, so many spaces are getting shut down. So many of my friends that are artists are moving away. So are we going to be supporting artists that moved here a week ago from San Francisco that are making 6 figures that don't really need those funds? Or are we going to be supporting artists from marginalized communities that are historically underrepresented and underfunded in the arts? And so I think those are questions that we need to be asking now. And I know I'm on my soapbox, and I know I always say this at every City of Austin event, but I'm not going to stop saying it until I see some actual change. Sorry.
Going off that, I think like one of the most exciting things about the UNESCO connections that we have with these people in other cities and other countries is to get also not just artistic collaboration, but to think about organizational strategies and see, like, for instance, obviously Europe just funds, you know, their artists, but like what's happening in Korea, what's happening in Colombia that's allowing these artistic, you know, ecosystems to thrive, that we can be exchanging those ideas.
Awesome, thank you all. Are there any questions from the audience? This is always like a stressful, nobody make eye contact, look at your phones real quick. And it's okay if there aren't questions, but I'll give you 5 more. Yes. We have a brave human. I love this.
Hello. I'm curious, when you're looking in Austin for collaborators, where are you looking? Who are you looking for? What sticks out for you when you're looking at people to make work with?
Honestly, you just meet people, you see their work, you think it's interesting, and you hope that, you know, I think it's just making personal connections. I'm not sure there's a repository or place where I look for collaborators. It's really more just meeting people that I like, and I like their work, and seeing if they have something they want to work together on.
Shout out to Artist Run Spaces, which I think is where we have found our most dynamic collaborators and like deep collaborators, deep friends that you know, projects that turn into deep friendships. And for us, it's usually the people doing like the weirdest shit that stand out. So wherever they are, where they're making stuff, that's where we like to go to.
Yeah, I think just like out, like you go to a show, you meet somebody, you talk to them, it organically happens. I also think Artist Run Spaces are a really special space. If you've never been to MMAC or Dada Geek or Moha, you should definitely come out to an event there. Most of them are free and open to the public, and you get to meet local artists. You sometimes get to meet visiting artists, and it's like a very casual, low pressure way to meet people in the arts, which I think is really important, and people need access points, right? To be exposed to different types of art, and I would start at Artist Run Spaces first, because you're going to meet people like you, which is what ultimately you want.
I'll just echo that and say that, you know, I had the privilege of working with Mohawk. That was fantastic. And yeah, Artist Run Spaces are so important and in need of funding. And I also love collaborating with curators and writers. I think that is really exciting. They are able to provide context and to sort of, they play a really important and vital role in all of this.
Any other brave souls? All right, well, we are about at that time where we will go upstairs and you can actually enjoy the art, talk to the artists, have some sips and bites and all of the things. But just wanted to thank you all for being here for the panel portion of the evening. Special big thank you to our local UNESCO steering committee who helped put on this incredible exhibition, and a shout out to the Austin Public Library staff